Harry Bliss, welcome to the Live on Form podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to get you on. We've been trying for a little bit of time, Harry. So it's really good to get you on here today and get your insight into your business. So you are the founder and CEO of Champion Health.
Yeah.
And I've seen, and you've told me, and I've seen it on LinkedIn that you are the Netflix of wellbeing, or you are calling yourself the Netflix of wellbeing, or someone has said you're the Netflix of wellbeing. And really you're about empowering employee well-being through, a myriad of aspects, really, data, engagement and insight. So if you could start by telling us a little bit about Champion Health, really, and then moving on to, why you started. So over to you.
Thank you. So in terms of the Netflix of wellbeing, what we've looked at is organizations that have been extremely successful at the moment. You look at the Netflix, you look at the Amazons of this world, you look at the Apples. What they've done is bring everything together into one place. That's what they're experts at. It makes life easier for everyone. And the brands that are most successful make life easier. They make life better as well within there for the individual consumer. And we've felt for a long time that health and well-being is difficult. Being healthy is one of the hardest things in society at the moment. No one's really nailed it. And although I don't think that we've quite nailed it at the moment, we're looking to simplify it. So we're looking to bring in mindfulness, your workouts that are tailored to the individual, your personalized health assessment, sounds to relax and focus, growth and learning content on all areas of well-being, performance and life, all into one platform. If you're female, for example, you can then understand managing the menopause, which there's a huge stigma about, or tracking menstrual cycles. If you're struggling with your mental health, there's then mood trackers, sleep trackers within there. So we're looking to bring everything into one platform to make healthier easier at the core of it. And that's going live in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
And you're working, so your breakdown of your business strategy, really, Harry. So you're working with businesses.
Organizations. So at the moment, we're a B2B provider. We definitely have an eye on the B2C market. If I'm being quite honest with you and all the listeners, the B2C market, you need huge amounts of capital to be able to break into it. So we're focusing on the B2B market, assisting organizations with not only empowering employee well-being, but creating organizational change with health and well-being strategy development. And we've also got an eye on Champion Student for the university population and college population, and also Champion Kids in the future as well. But we don't want to try and bite off too much too soon.
How did it work so far then, Harry? How does how does this system work? You're working with an organization. They've got a ton of employees. How do they use your business?
So it starts with the individual. And this is where I think a lot of the wellbeing market is struggling, is that it's not hyper-personalized to the individual. I'm a very different character and I require very different solutions and services to someone that's a 50-year-old female, for example, to someone that's 18-year-old male coming out of school into the workplace for the first time. So it starts with a personalized assessment that looks at, again, all areas of their well-being. And through the artificial intelligence and the algorithms, it then provides you with a personalized health report at the heart of it, with action plans, information within there. And then it feeds into the platform itself. So you've got the academy, which is all of your learning and growth content that's customized to you. So for me at the moment, it might be on beating procrastination. That's the one thing that I really need to improve in terms of performance. For someone else, it might be understanding anxiety, for instance. So it's a really important thing that we personalize the user journey to be able to get the most out of that individual and for them to get the most out of the platform.
And this is open to every employee within that organization. And I guess it's online. So you're starting online, right? There's an online questionnaire. You go and you go from there. It's pretty simple. All the detail and info is then collated, and then the employer has that to then, what managed from there, or is that managed by you?
So each employee has full access to the suite of resources. We also actually give every employee friends and family access for 3 friends or family members at no additional cost. So just to be able to extend our mission even further. In terms of the organization, we don't share individuals' data with the company. Otherwise, trust is lost immediately. It breaches GDPR and so much else within there. But what we're able to do is provide anonymized and confidential health analytics on the workforce. At the core of it is to be able to then support the employees. So if physical inactivity is a big issue, or if sleep's a big issue, or anxiety, depression, all of these areas have such a big impact upon an individual's health and happiness, but also their productivity too. So we look at it from all angles. We're able to aggregate the data and then share it with the organization, and then build a strategy that's data-driven, not gut-led.
And before we get into why you started your business, I guess there's lots of insight now, lots of attention given to individual mental health, and rightly so, and especially probably multiplied through lockdown, which we'll be interested to speak to you about that as well. But lots more attention, lots more more businesses and organizations switching to trying to find a solution, an holistic solution rather than something that is kind of a box ticker, right? Yeah. So I guess over the last 10 years, you've had, plenty of businesses doing, box ticking exercises where there's been, listen, how do you feel? Not great, right? Go and get an assessment, or go to X and Y provider. What makes Champion Health different? And I guess why did you personally start this, foray into helping individuals with their mental health and their mental well-being? What's the kind of kickstart for you?
So the kickstart for me was it's a very personal story that I share openly. I was working for the largest corporate health and wellbeing provider out of university, decided to leave them because they didn't align with my values. And I thought that we could have so much more impact with more people, quite simply by delivering something that's data-led, drives engagement, covers all areas of wellbeing, is all in one platform. So I left that organization, and I was really clear on the wellbeing model. We had a team of professors, cognitive behavioral therapists, GPs. The wellbeing team was extremely strong. But if I'm being brutally honest, I was 24 at the time. I didn't know how to run a business, successfully scale a business, and the operations behind it and what was required. So I approached a friend of mine. I coached his kids at cricket. He was a director of a global organization, knew business like the back of his hand. And he supported me in the early days, whether that was just over a pint after work or a curry night, for example. But also I went into his office multiple times to be able to discuss how I can operate the business most efficiently. He had a wife and 2 kids, raised over £750,000 for charity, and tragically ended up taking his own life due to a short bout of stress. This came as a massive shock, massive surprise. He's the last person I expected or anticipated to have ended up taking his own life, quite simply. And he was the person that I looked up to when I was 45 years old and in his position. I wanted to be in his position. Yeah. So that's the fire in my belly, quite simply. It was 6 months into Champion's journey. And ever since, we've been purely mission driven. It turned from something that I wanted to work. I wanted the business to work beforehand. I now need it to work, quite simply, to be able to achieve our mission of changing and saving lives.
And are you finding businesses care? And I guess when I say that is, do they care, or do they, are they keeping, the peasants with the pitchforks from their door? Because ultimately, sometimes, when there's an issue illuminated, then bigger businesses, when the bottom line comes into play, they signal an intention, but really, again, it becomes a box ticking exercise, which is no good, right? Because then you're back to square one and nothing's done. So are you finding that businesses and business leaders are educated enough and, progressive enough to care, if not meaning everything in their life, are they at least caring to the point of being able to make a difference and it mattering?
I suppose there's 2 questions. The one that I want to answer is yes, absolutely they care. The realistic answer is that some organizations do, some organizations don't. The really big thing within there is that cultures are so important. And when a culture is built with well-being in the foreground of it, they're so much more successful. The research is absolutely monumental in terms of health and well-being. Good health and well-being leads to good business performance. You're more likely to recruit better people. And people now aren't just looking at the salary. They're looking at, what is this organization going to enable me to grow and develop? Is it going to look after me as well if something happens, for example? So recruitment, it's absolutely essential that you're looking at health and well-being. Retention, it's a huge cost to organizations losing their key members of staff. That's another area. There's then productivity and performance in itself. How many employees are actually engaged with the work that they're doing? And engagement is linked again with well-being. So how many employees are working behind a Zoom lens at the moment and just pretending to actually work when they're actually doing nothing? It's counterproductive, it's counterintuitive, and that's presenteeism at the heart of it. You then look at absence. That's another factor within. You look at reputational risk, you look at the legal risk. There's just so many areas. I could keep going on here. Yep. But there are so many areas that it makes sense for not only the moral case, but also the business and the financial case to look after employee well-being. I think one thing that a lot of organizations are starting to come around, but it's taking a bit of time, and in 5 years, we're going to be there, in my opinion, is that well-being and good well-being doesn't come at the cost of high performance. It's exactly the opposite.
I completely agree.
When I'm performing at my best, I'm at my most healthy. So this morning I woke up, did 5 minutes of mindfulness, 10-minute workout, straight onto the morning call, hit the ground running, delivered a sales pitch to an organization that I hope went really well. It felt like it went really well. Onto this podcast now. At lunchtime, I'll do something again to look after my well-being. Hopefully then I have a productive afternoon. Without that, everything crumbles for me as an individual. It does for other people as well. So well-being doesn't come at the cost of high performance. It's exactly the opposite.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about that. And I guess a couple of points from my side, one probably on well-being and one on culture. I can remember, and I think I told a story on LinkedIn about when I first set foot in a gym. And, you go into a gym with a perception that, the big guys there chucking weights around and they're there to pose around and, sort of primp, strut around in the mirror and kind of primp.
Peacock and
and listen, there are people like that, and there probably was more and will still be. But what I really noticed is that these guys came from different walks of life, from different cultures, and they came in and you could see, there was a morning crowd and they came in before work, and they just left better people. And then the evening crowd, I'd sometimes go back and do an evening shift during a work. It was a work placement thing I did, and the evening shift came in, and guys, in sort of suits and ties, and you see, they had pretty important jobs, and they just came in stressed. You could see the stress kind of etched on their face, and then they'd have this workout, this intense kind of physical punishment, if you like, and they'd leave lighter people. You just saw them leave lighter people, and they go back to their families in a better frame of mind than if they'd gone straight back after work, straight back from sort of tense and anxious environment. So, I've been an advocate of exercise and wellness, framing your day for years and years and years now. And we used to always do it at PhD in the at the start, really. Everyone I brought in, they just gravitated towards kind of working out. And I don't believe I got it right all the time, but I think, and the second thing, a culture is interesting. And I read something the other day about why a lot of acquisitions fail, and they fail because they do weeks and weeks, and I've been through this, weeks and weeks of due diligence, forensically analyzing accounts, legal and contracts, etc. The numbers, right? The numbers, and they do not 1 minute on culture. And then expect to
just emerge,
embed a business into an existing, not always a culture, but what is assumed to be a culture, and you have complete collapse, right? Because there's no attention given to that culture. And I wonder how acquisitions will move in the future. I wonder if they will spend more time on the important things. A business is successful because of the people and culture. The numbers take care of themselves if the first two things are right.
Yeah.
And I wonder how that's going to progress, really. So you went to Champion. How has that been from start to where you are now? You know, when did you start? How long you been going? And you know, what's the current position? And moving on to how's COVID impacted that? I imagine massively, but it'd be great to hear.
Yeah, so founded 3 years ago next month, actually. We're probably going to have some kind of awful Zoom COVID party. I wish that we could all get together, but obviously we can't at the moment. So 3 years ago, again, I want to be brutally honest, entrepreneurship is glamorized. My friends were thinking that I'd be driving around in a Ferrari or a Lamborghini in year 2. It's just not been the case at all. There's a lot of graft. There's a lot of responsibility as an initial sole founder. A lot of pressure. You know what it's like, Jay, in terms of covering all of the bases, really having the attention to detail. You make some huge calls early on as well. And this was, I've never run a business beforehand. Unfortunately, a lot of the big decisions that we made were very good. Some of the smaller decisions, we made mistakes, we learned from it very quickly. And you've got to have that adaptability and that resilience within the early days. It's not all been rosy, quite simply. It's in an extremely good position right now. But if you were to ask me that question 2 years ago, I would have definitely turned around and said everything's going well when it wasn't. It was difficult. It was long days. It was hard yards. It was testing prototypes, and then actually they weren't working, and then having to sort of nudge that and change what our approach was. So in the early days, it was a lot of hard yards. Now it's a lot of hard yards, but we're getting the success and the reward from it. So fast forward on 3 years, we've now worked with over 400 organizations, ranging from the NHS, which has been amazing to support them during the pandemic. And we've had amazing feedback from nurses, doctors, surgeons off the back of the platform, through to the likes of Grant Thornton, large accountancy practice, through to the construction industry, through to smaller businesses and organizations as well. So we support a wide range of organizations in being able to deliver effective health and wellbeing strategies for their people. So it's been a whirlwind, something that you can never prepare for. And as someone that's experienced in business as yourself, I guess that no two businesses and no two stories are the same. There have been stumbling blocks, but I think the resilience to be able to get over those and get through those has been absolutely essential. So in terms of the team now, we're a team of internally 12. And then we have a wider team of health experts. So there's 55 health experts from 3 universities, a team of GPs, a team of cognitive behavioral therapists, etc., that are making sure everything's academically valid from the health and wellbeing angle.
Yeah, that's massively interesting. I think it'd be good to understand. I read something yesterday or maybe a few days ago, which kind of shocked me. Again, I posted it yesterday on LinkedIn about men age 40 to 49 and being, being the highest risk of suicide in the UK.
Yeah.
Men age 40 to 40. And that surprised me. And it probably shouldn't do because it's probably widely available. But as someone who's, thankfully never really suffered, from mental health issues, it came as a real surprise. And also that, men are 3 times more likely to die of suicide. Again, I would have assumed it was more. It was more than women, but I wouldn't have thought it was that high. How do you find within the organizations that the stigma of, traditional masculine energy, how is that enabling men to, in that age group especially, which is my age group, which is, come from, maybe a more kind of stoical, it might not be the right word, but a more traditional background of not sharing issues. How are you finding men specifically are reacting to Champion and to what's been offered?
I think there's a lot to unpick within here. Obviously, my friend that ended up taking his own life, 45-year-old male, he had no previous history of struggling with his mental health until this really acute bout of stress came along for him. So I actually delivered a talk, it was around a year ago, before the initial lockdown started. And I got people to stand up if they had mental health. My question was, stand up if you have mental health. This was mainly 40 to sort of 60-year-old CEOs, leaders within the organization. Of a group of about 150, about 15 stood up. That's one of the biggest problems at the moment in our society, is that mental health, we all have it. Everyone has mental health, just like we have physical health. And it's not a trick question at all. If I was to ask you, Jay, do you have physical health? You would absolutely go, yeah, of course I do. If I was to ask someone, do you have mental health? They may go and pause and stutter and not quite be sure. 1 in 4 people every year struggle with a mental health disorder. 1 in 1 of us have mental health, and this changes daily, weekly, and yearly. So that's a really important thing that I think we need to get across as a society more so. I think there's a lot to also to unpick in terms of the upbringings, and it was a stiff upper lip from my understanding, in terms of the classical upbringing, the more traditional upbringing of man up, let's pull things together. And that can only lead to, and when I struggled with my mental health and I didn't open up, I did quite a classic male thing of bottling it up until someone really supported me and spotted the warning signs. It's that element that's a huge issue within our male culture, to just be solution focused at all times rather than sharing what the issues are and being able to openly talk about it. It's a huge superpower for a lot of men, being able to be solution focused at the heart of it. But we also need to be able to open up, share our issues, and share the load with other people within there too. I think the final thing with the 40 to 49-year-old males is that they're likely to be parents. They're likely to be in jobs that are middle managers potentially, or senior leaders with extreme levels of stress sometimes.
Sorry to butt in. Will that change? Will that change now? Now we're aware of different ways of working.
Yeah.
Do you think that will change?
In what way do I think that the demographic and the age range of leaders will change, or the stress levels for the people in those positions?
The stress levels for the people in those positions, because it's tends to be that middle management level that get a lot of the shit, right?
Yeah,
they get a lot of shit. They get it from below, they get it from above, and they've got to deal with it. And and they've often got financial responsibilities, obligations, family obligations.
Yeah.
And it's not difficult for me to understand how that becomes crushing.
Yeah.
So I guess this is where the organizations have all the responsibility in the world, okay, right, to take away that continuous stress on those middle management positions.
I hope the answer is yes. I just don't think it will be, though, in all honesty. The pandemic has shown that we're working longer hours than we were pre-pandemic. Okay. So even though we're working from home, many people are working from home, and organizations are more aware of employee well-being than ever before. Employee well-being has worsened and working hours have lengthened. Have we been more productive? I'm not 100% convinced with that as much as anything. So I actually think that there's been more pressure on line managers, middle management, and also senior leaders through the turbulent times that we're in at the moment. I think there's also a big issue that there's a huge focus on training line managers in mental health and emotional intelligence. Why aren't we doing this with everyone? We need to be training everyone in an organization in how to spot the warning signs of friends, family members, colleagues that are struggling, and being able to support them, signpost them going forwards as well. So I think that there's more and more being piled on line managers and leaders within organizations. And I think what we need to do, in my opinion, is to be able to spread the load across the organization, so the receptionist has the same level of training to be able to support their colleagues as the line managers do. So the load is shared.
And I'm not sure it helps when there's, a growth of, software that enables a business leader to keep a track on their employees when they're working from home, right? So you've now got a growth in, software packages that can almost spy on employees whilst they're sat at their desk, and they know when they've left their home desk, and they know when they're back at their home desk. And that's probably even worse than presenteeism, because that's surveillance, right?
Yeah. And there's huge data risks and data issues with that. Would any employee sign up to that? Probably not, in all honesty. And that's the kind of thing that's going to lead to really toxic cultures and have a huge impact. It will ripple throughout the organization, and you can't regain that kind of trust going forwards. That's the thing that I've learned with culture, is that once something happens and it spreads throughout the organization, my word, it's so hard to then change going forwards. And that's why we work so hard on culture early on within Champion. Even though we're an internal team of 12 at the moment, we work so hard on culture, so then when the next 12 come on board and we're a team of 24, then they know exactly what the culture is and how to treat people, how to speak to them, for example.
It'd be interesting to know how you've done that, because I always think culture, you know, I've seen businesses compile massive culture docs that either get left in the top drawer, or it's just wordsmithing for the sake of it. You know, and it's just playing, you know, it's just playing kind of you know, word to the actual meaning. But it's interesting. I always think that a culture comes from, or a culture is defined by the leader of the business. So, you know, you can have a great culture doc that is embraced by the rest of the business, and then in a team meeting, the leader, the CEO, comes in a shit mood, storms around, stomps his feet, cusses people out, and that's the culture. That, you know, that's the culture in that 30-second outburst. That is the culture of the business, and everyone reverts back to that, regardless of what's written down, documented, or you know, supposedly, you know, taken in by the business. So I guess how do you define how you set your culture up, and how do you kind of internalize that in an ability to lead the business?
I think that, you've hit the nail on the head. That there are so many organizations that have documents as big as Harry Potter books, but do they actually act upon them? And it's the actions that are the most important thing with any culture. And actually leading as an from my angle, leading is a huge thing in being able to get across the culture that I want the organization as we scale to become. I think that it's top down, but it's also bottom up and side to side. Everyone needs to buy into the culture. And if something's not quite right, not letting it slip. So if something's slightly wrong, or a comment slightly off the cuff that we don't like, we nip it in the bud straight away and we'll deal with it. And that just shows that there's a zero tolerance to something that's outside of the culture that we want to build. I think the phrase that we use, we're always quite reluctant of using buzz terms that could be on a company wall, for example, because it's sometimes those companies that don't live up to them.
Absolutely.
But the phrase that we really look to use is freedom with accountability. So we will hold you accountable as employees. I hold myself accountable. I want my team to hold me accountable, but I also want the freedom to be able to go out on a run, for example, during midday. I want the freedom to be able to suggest new ideas. I want the freedom to be able to experiment and be creative and to build an even better platform for our clients. So I think the freedom with accountability really nails what we're going for as an organization, and making sure that everything's inclusive at the heart of it as well.
Where's resilience built? Where's that built from? Where does it?
Good question.
Because we talk about resilience a lot. I kind of like the word. I like resilience, but I absolutely recognize, and there's a lot of expectations around resilience, and children should be resilient, and which is ludicrous, really, when if the parent's not showing that resilience, and the culture they're around is not doing the same. So I think it's hard to define what resilience is. It's really important. A child is never born with it, but needs to learn it. And I think in this day and age, and I'd like to move on to social media later, and I guess the role that's played, especially in Gen Z, but also in an older generation, like myself as well. How do you think, how do you manage resilience, and I guess what's your thoughts on it, and its place in organizations structure, but also in people?
I think resilience it's absolutely essential. Business resilience, individual resilience is crucial, but I think the way we need to frame resilience is slightly different. we need to view resilience as something that's a collective. We need resilient individuals around us to then be resilient ourselves. That's what the research is showing. We're not resilient as individuals just on our own. When I'm most resilient, I sleep well, I eat well, I move a lot. I'm delivering productive work, for example. That's when I'm most resilient, and you can throw anything at me and I can really, hopefully, deal with it. I can deal with it much better, much more efficiently, and make better decisions.
What's the one thing that damages or penetrates that resilience? Out of those 4 things you mentioned, sleep, eating, moving, which one thing, if you didn't have, do you feel that resilience kind of falling away?
For me as an individual, it's sleep. Sleep is the absolute foundation of my health and well-being. When I sleep well, I make better decisions around my food, around my physical activity, around the business as well. So for me as an individual, it's sleep. For many people, it will be sleep also, but we are very different as individuals. I need 8 or 9 hours of sleep per night. I really prioritize my sleep, make sure I'm in bed for 10, 11 o'clock every night and asleep for them as well. For some people, it's movement. So I think if we look to prioritize one of the areas, the other areas start to fall into place. So what we need to do as humans is to be able to identify what is that foundation for me as an individual that then leads to those other behaviors being healthier.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of research in there around, especially in children, and the building of resilience, and children going to bed at crazy hours at night and getting such less sleep. I mean, it is drastically damaging to to cognitive development, physical development, but behavioral development of children. And you see it all the time. And I was only speaking to my wife the other day. We had a couple of kids in our school when I was a young lad, and they used to come in and kind of brag around going to bed late at night, and we'd be like, oh shit, your parents are so cool, letting you go to bed at midnight. And they would be the worst behaved, without fail, they'd be the worst behaved kid in the school. So I agree. I agree. I mean, sleep for me is massively important. It's interesting. What's your lowest limit of sleep that you think you function optimally on?
7 hours. I'm really, I'm a bit of a princess when it comes to my sleep, in all honesty. But
well,
7 hours.
Seven's not a massive amount, right? Seven's, and it used to be, and I can remember watching the guy on I think it's a podcast. I'm not sure about the guy's name. I want to say Matthew Sinclair, but I get my name.
Matthew Walker.
Matthew Walker, correct? Yeah. Sinclair's a longevity guy, and he was saying just how culture's kind of shrunk back the amount of what the amount of sleep that they believe is optimal, and it used to be 8, and now it's like 6 is fine. And just how much damage of an impact those extra 2 hours can have. Even on men, I think it's about a 15% drop in testosterone, which is responsible for so much in a life of a man. Energy levels, sort of vibrancy, vitality, everything really. So I agree. I try and get 7. I try and get 8. Difficult with 2 children, but that is definitely my goal. What's your thoughts on social media?
It's a huge debate at the moment. I think it can be used for good, but on the whole, it's a really damaging thing for society. We're constantly switched on, and that's what social media is there for. Have you watched The Social Dilemma, the documentary?
I have, yeah. I've seen that, and I've watched Tristan Harris on a few other podcasts, and I think it's really interesting, and I think it's a big concern. It's a big concern for me, especially having 2 children. Right. Sort of smacking that. I don't know what the gen is. It Gen Alpha 1 to 8. I lose track, but it's a massive kind of interest, but also a concern of mine. Cool. I can remember reading in, I think it was might be the happiness hypothesis. It was one of Jonathan Haidt's books about social media and kind of the impact on that generation born, I think, post 1996, and the impact on anxiety and depression, and just the spike that it's had, and especially on heavy users. I think light to moderate users, it was different. It's not the same, but heavy users and that kind of immersion into, you know, continuous social media, I think is a really interesting ride we're going to go down in the next 20 years. I don't know if we look back in 20 years and social media will be like, you know, cigarettes are now, you know, where we suddenly realized just how much damage it's done, but too late, especially when, and I think we put a lot of emphasis on kids misusing social media, but I think it's adults. I think the example that adults set to children on how we use social media and our, you know, the kind of, I guess, kind of ideological bubbles that we find ourselves in, that, you know, that reinforces all our narratives and bias and continuous argument. I think we set an appalling example to, you know, to young people around our use of social media.
And I think that a lot of I see a lot of fingers pointed at these Gen Z, Gen X, Gen Alpha, and it's not their fault. Humans haven't suddenly evolved over the past 20 years. It's been millions, if not billions of years of evolution. And for a whole generation to be struggling with their mental health, to be self-harming at the rates that young females are self-harming, it's not the individual's fault themselves. It's the fault of, in my opinion, the social media organizations that need to be able to actually react in a moral way. Whilst their monetization strategy is all about attention, and attentionomics is the big term that's coming out of it at the moment, and they're monetizing it through advertising, they're just going to try and gather as much attention from these individuals as possible. We know that fake news spreads 4 times faster than real news, for example. We know that social comparison is a massive issue within, especially young females as well, comparing themselves to the Kylie Jenners, the Kendall Jenners, the Kim Kardashians.
But also, it used to be, Harry, that, you know, young girls would compare themselves to models in magazines. Well, now they're comparing themselves with, you know, doctored imagery on Instagram of their mates, right? Which has got to be, I mean, when you strip that back to what it is, it's one of the most singularly destructive psychology experiments ever created, right?
And that's what it is. It's one big psychology experiment. That's the algorithm. It's there to build or to create attention to something. And the way to get attention for a lot of people is through social approval, through the likes of likes themselves. That's the way that a lot of people now are determining success, is how many likes can I get? And what gets more likes? It's 3 things. It's sex, threat, and difference. They're the 3 things that command human attention. And so that's what social media has really become into. So you just scroll down a social media platform, the things that are really going viral are those things. And it is quite alarming, really.
And of course, this is all playing into that, you know, mental health destruction.
Yeah.
Right. Which must be, so how do you think workplaces, how do you think organizations are managing this? Because that's a real tricky issue around social media use. Because, you know, essentially you've got your private time, you'll go away, you'll do what you want.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a workplace solution. I wonder if there's a government solution. I'm never a fan of giving the government more power than they already have. I think private organizations having a bit more is fine if they use it well. But I guess, how do you think we manage this social media, you know, growth and the kind of the drive for attention, whilst at the same point managing, you know, businesses and trying to manage the mental health of our employees within those business?
I think businesses can only do so much within this journey. I think we do need to place, I think there needs to be regulation. I really do think there needs to be regulation for the social media organizations at the forefront. And so it's a societal thing. I think there needs to be more awareness for people, how much damage is actually being caused by these organizations, and how you can use social media in a positive way. I do use social media. I use LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and I use it in a positive way to be able to enrich my life and to be able to stay connected with people. That's what social media is really there for, but it's turned into this other beast. So I think, do you disagree with that?
Yeah, I don't think it was, well, I think you can have your debates on why it was started in the first place. I think the fairy tale is it was started for that. I think the reality might be it was started for a different reason. But yeah, you know, I get it.
Agree.
I get it. What so within the organizations, your guys have access to this whole breadth of understanding around, you know, wellness and kind of mindfulness. It'd be interesting, actually. You said you did 5 minutes mindfulness. What do you do?
So I stick on 5 minutes of a guided meditation that takes you through things around, it might be work-related stress, for example. Sometimes I even just put on relaxing sounds in the background, and just take 5 minutes to sit down. A lot of people think that mindfulness is the kind of away with the fairies, running through a forest with flowers around your head. It's actually the most successful CEOs and business people and sports people, LeBron James, for example, practices mindfulness regularly. And so we just need to change the narrative around that. So I spend 5 minutes every morning, every day after work as well, and then every evening before I go to bed, just spending 5 minutes to train my brain. I see my brain as a muscle. Just like we do half an hour of physical activity a day, we need to be doing 10, 15 minutes, whatever feels comfortable and whatever you can fit into your busy life, around mindfulness, to be able to build that resilience at the core of it.
And the employees have got access to advice on what they can do for mindfulness? Have they got access to people, or is it app based? And again, then for movement, I guess, how do you, because movement's is a massive thing for me, and that's why I like to call it movement, because I think that is what it's about. Do they get recommendations? Do they get access?
So there's personalized recommendations. So we want to make it inclusive. We want to be able to get males into yoga, for example, that haven't been able to do these crazy yoga sessions that they see online, where it's a young female that can bend like nothing else. And so what we want to do is break the stigma around movement, to be able to enable those individuals that aren't moving enough to be able to start moving. We've also got seated workouts for the immobile, or the wheelchair user community within there, that's been delivered by a Paralympian. So our focus is making movement and exercise and activity inclusive at the heart of it. So we're able to personalize, depending on your age, depending on your health status, depending on your preference as well, certain exercise and activities that you can engage with.
And then, so that's mindfulness, that's movement, nutrition.
Yep, nutrition. So we've had a nutritionist from Tottenham Hotspur that's built over 100 recipes that you can engage with, breaks down the method and the ingredients, the stuff that you're used to, but also the health insights as well. So you're able to determine if you're wanting to go on a high fiber diet, for example, or low calorie, high fat, whichever you're wanting to do as an individual. You're able to see that within the nutrition section of the platform. And we're also going to be creating bespoke nutrition plans that's dependent upon the individual's wants and needs as well going forwards.
So what's the future for workplace mental health?
I think it's bringing everything into one integrated system. So employees know where to go. If they are well, how do we keep them well? If they are struggling, how do we then get them well? We need to integrate it. We need to focus on all areas of well-being as well. That's going to be absolutely essential. That mental health is the big focus at the moment, but mental health doesn't come without good sleep, without physical activity, without good nutrition. We need to break the stigma on female health as well within here. We need to support leaders with their own well-being. So that's the aim of what we're trying to achieve, is to bring everything into one platform to not only empower employees, but be able to then create organizational change through data-driven decision making.
I think female health as well. You know, we spoke a lot about male health, but female health as well is massive. I've just recently invested in you mentioned menopause, and in a menopause brand that creates, uses research driven ingredients, vitamins, minerals, adaptogens, things like that to help with kind of the varying stages of menopause, because it's massively understood. I mean, listen, it's not only is it understood from women, But guys, it's one of those words that you run away in terror from. You hear menopause, it's like, it's a swear word, right? For for a certain type of guy, and certainly for a certain generation of guy. But it's such a massive part in a woman's life, and such a long part in a woman's life, and such a big part thereafter as well. So it'll be interesting, and that age group, such a key and growing and big part of any organization, but no real impetus and no real attention given to it historically. So what's kind of the plan for that as well? Because that's a similar age group to this 40 to 49, male that we were talking about, that's massively at risk of suicide. Or, also I was reading on the same study that, men more prone to, alcohol and drug abuse. But what's the plan to tackle that same age group in that female group as well?
So I think that there's a huge stigma around the menopause, as you touched upon there. There's a huge lack of education as well within the workplace, and that's not just for women themselves, that's for men as well. We need to be able to understand the types of language, understand the symptoms, to be able to then support these individuals going through it. There needs to be the policies to support them from an organizational level as well. But one of the things that we're able to do through our academy section of the platform is we've got a masterclass on managing the menopause at work, and how to talk about the menopause at work as well within there. So that education piece is being delivered by Champion and our platform going forwards. It's not only the individual's responsibility themselves to upskill themselves and understand more. It's the responsibility of everyone within the organization to be able to understand what other people are actually going through.
Because that's a huge part of mental health, right? So I can imagine, I can imagine the hormonal effect of that, right? It's going to have a huge kind of, cognitive and mental change in what is still, half a life thereafter. Do you think, again, I guess again, is this something that businesses are they ticking a box? Because the language that is, the language that will be around, sort of traditional boardroom for 50 plus males around menopause, right? The kind of language. And therefore it's dealt with quite flippantly, probably the same flippancy as mental health is. So it's just interesting to see, what's going to happen in that area as well. I think it's the brand I'm invested in, I think it's a brilliant play, and I think it's and I invested it because I think it's much needed, really vital, and a real kind of key area that's been massively under researched and under provided for, in the same way that the mental health is as well as you're finding. What's the generational shift, Harry, that you find opinions start to change at? What's the age? What's that age where you could say, right, do you know what, people under this age tend to be more progressive on mental health. People over this age tend to be more set in their ways and a little bit resist. Because you see it all the time, don't you? And even maybe that's culturally as well as geographically as well. We're both from Yorkshire, right? So I'm from West Yorkshire originally, and being from Yorkshire is, my family were massively stoical, and I'm a big fan of the Stoics, right? I practice stoicism from my life, but that doesn't mean to be being a Stoic doesn't mean to be ignorant of challenges that people have. It's just a very balanced view on what is life, and therefore not getting too happy, not getting too down. I'm sure we've both been out with the happiest person in the room, and their dark places are very dark. When they're dark, whereas my dark places have always just been quite just light grey. And I think there's a lot of value in that, but at the same time, there's no value in ignorance. So where do you think that age typically sits?
I don't think there's necessarily an age. There is definitely a generational shift between the approaches to mental health and well-being throughout generations. But I do know 60, 70-year-old individuals that are working within organizations at the moment that are the ones that are driving this, that are the ones that are seeing the issues with mental health and well-being. The thing that I would say, though, is they've had to do a lot more to challenge their individual perceptions that's been ingrained from the past.
Categorically.
So they're just having to work harder and harder and harder to be able to learn about the language to use, about the importance of mental well-being, to challenge their own individual perceptions. So I think as a society, it's never been easier to talk about mental health. I think that is that's definite. But I don't think there is quite a clear black and white cutoff between 60-year-olds, for example, are like this and 20-year-olds are like this. I think there are a lot of 60-year-olds that are seeing the importance of looking out for and looking after our individual mental health, but also other people's as well.
Okay, so next couple of years, where do you see yourself? Where do you see yourself growing? What's kind of the progression? Where does this thing lead?
So it's getting it launched in 2 weeks. So we're going to start beta testing it. Very busy time, long hours, as I'm sure you know, and you've done. It's then getting it out there into organizations. So we've worked with over 400 organizations so far. We want to just be able to extend that mission across the UK. We've got an eye on the global business as well. So we want to be able to support global businesses in supporting them with their staff, looking at potentially getting the platform translated into other languages to, again, make it even more inclusive in the UK, but also accessible to organizations worldwide. And then it's looking at the champion student and champion kids once we've reached a certain mark. So not only being able to support adults in the workplace, but also being able to support those people that are going to go into the workplace beyond. We want to have a long-lasting impact upon everyone in our society.
Good place to stop, Harry. I think. Listen, I've really enjoyed that. I think.
Thank you, mate.
I think what you're doing is awesome. I've been kind of a big fan of it since we met a while ago, and we've kind of kept in touch. And through your various challenges as well. And I think the fact that you've carried on growing the business and developing it, to where it is now, is a real kind of testament to your own resilience, if we can use that word. So really, really excited to see where you take it. Wish you all the best. You're still a young man, so there's plenty of time before you get to my age, and have to have another thought about where you're going. But yeah, really good to speak to you, and take care.
Thank you, Jay.
Cheers, mate. Bye bye.